Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary and Social Care Secretary, we should say, Labour MP for Ilford North. We said he was coming, and indeed, he joined just now. Wes, have you been off learning your 6 pledges? Is that the delay?
Oh, don't even go there. Don't even go there.
What are they?
You have no
Sorry, just
idea
remind
how
me, what
hard
are
I've
they?
been kicking.
Just what are they? Just
They
remind
are
me.
deliver economic stability, cut NHS waiting times, launch a new border security command, crack down on antisocial behaviour, set up Great British Energy, and recruit 6,500 teachers. And the annoying thing is, I knew that question would come up this morning. You spend time preparing for it, and then in the moment, I had a total brain freeze.
Look, 5 out of 6.
I am kicking myself harder than Keir Starmer's going to kick me on Monday.
But 5 out of 6 ain't bad, is it? And what's antisocial behaviour? Although I see that.
I was going to say what an upgrade you are on David Lammy, but now you've been mean to me. You can forget it. Bring back Lammy. That's what I say.
Yeah, well, indeed. Hashtag. Anyway, we should talk a little bit about the health service in the NHS. You've got a interview in the Telegraph, I think, today, where you are saying that you want to. Hospitals are going to be asked to share staff pool waiting lists as part of a £1.1 billion drive to provide an extra 40,000 appointments a week. Tell us a bit more about this.
So NHS waiting lists are at record highs, and in order to cut waiting lists, we're going to use an approach that's been tried and tested at a very small number of hospitals, including the London hospital I can see from my office window, and make that facility available to patients right across the country. That will be an extra £1.1 billion going into the pockets of NHS staff to deliver clinics at evenings and weekends, to get people off those waiting lists through diagnostic tests and treatments so we can cut the backlog. We're also going to be pooling waiting lists across regions, so we make best use of staff capacity and also the facilities, operating theatres, scanners, and doing that, I think we will make a real difference, and quite quickly as well. I mean, we can get 40,000 appointments up and running within the first year of a Labour government. So, having those 40,000 extra appointments every week, more than 2 million a year, will make a real difference.
You've also said the NHS is over-reliant on migrant workers. What is Labour going to do to change that?
We're going to deliver the biggest expansion of NHS staff in history. So we start training our own homegrown talent and reduce reliance on overseas migration for a few key reasons. I mean, firstly, we are recruiting as a country from red list countries that are identified by the World Health Organization as having real shortages. So I think that is unethical and immoral, actually. Secondly, we are turning away thousands of straight A students from studying medicine at university, which seems crazy and unfair to them. And thirdly, there is a global shortage of healthcare workers. So in terms of thinking about Britain's long-term security in terms of health and care workforce, we shouldn't assume that pool of international workers will always be there to draw on, because there is a global shortage. And so to make sure we mitigate against that risk, I want to make sure we're training our own homegrown talent. The NHS will always have an international workforce, yes, and I'm proud of the fact it does, actually, but we've got to make sure we're getting the proportion right.
Do you think that in general migration is too high?
I think net migration levels are too high, and I think it is having an impact, particularly in terms of housing pressures, for example. And I certainly see that as a MP on the London-Essex border. Again, you want to make sure from around the world that is the beating heart of the global economy. And so people coming to work here from overseas, to study here from overseas especially, has brought real benefits to our country. But I think we've got to view migration in that nuanced way of recognising that there are benefits, there are also challenges, and at the moment net migration is running at record highs. And I think I can help Yvette Cooper as the Home Secretary bring some of those numbers down by making sure we're not over-reliant on health and care workers from overseas.
But I mean, sometimes there is a trade-off, isn't there? I mean, if it is a case that, and I've got the dilemma, at least in the short term, where it's a case of, do we bring waiting lists down and thereby recruit more people from abroad, at least in the short term, or focus on net migration? There's a trade-off. Which would the Labour government prioritise?
Yeah, and I think that we're going to take a balanced approach. But I mean, one of the things that I'm really gobsmacked by this week is this speculation that the government is going to clamp down on universities recruiting international students, which I think would be such an extraordinary act of national self-harm, because international students come to the UK. They pay significant fees that help to subsidise education for British students and research in our universities. They also contribute to the UK in the longer term, because the amount of soft power this country has around the world, both in terms of business and diplomacy, because we've got people who've come to the UK, spent some of their formative years in their late teens and 20s in Britain. They then go back to countries they came from, become leaders in business and politics and other areas, and they retain a real affection for this country. So I think the government's got to tread very carefully on this, because if they start just clamping down on universities recruiting international students, they'll do real harm to the anemic economic growth we see under this government.
We should turn to the infected blood scandal. I mean, just on a point of information briefly, assuming Jeremy Hunt announces, as we are told he's going to do, there's going to be £10 billion in compensation, that will be matched pound for pound by a Labour government.
We're going to back him. I must say, it's not often I pick up a Sunday paper, see something the Chancellor said and breathe a huge sigh of relief in a good way, because the victims of this scandal have been waiting for so long for justice. And there's a real human tragedy of unspeakable proportions in this, in that every 4 days another one of those victims dies without justice or compensation. So time is of the essence. And I was beginning to really worry that we were going to get to this week, the publication of Sir Brian Langstaff's landmark report, and then he was going to long grass it and say, oh, this will be for the other side of the general election, when those families, I don't think, can wait. So if
you want it paid immediately?
And I expect he will. Well, if he does the right thing this week, and I expect he will, we'll be supporting him in that. So I think, given that this is a scandal that straddles successive governments, Labour-led and Conservative-led governments, I think it would be fitting, actually, if we came together to solve this problem. And I think the Chancellor will do the right thing and will support him.
To be clear, but you want it to be immediate. You don't want it to say that this is going to, again, go in terms of the funding, take place after the general election, or just give a pledge. You want it to happen now.
I think the sooner the better. And the government said, well, we're waiting for the publication of the final report. Well, that's this week. So, I hope that they're ready and able to act. And if they do, we will absolutely support them in that, because it is the right thing to do. And if Jeremy Hunt only does one thing between now and the general election, let it be this. I think these families have gone through an unbearable tragedy. Yeah. It's been a disaster, frankly, and I think they deserve that justice and that compensation.
Do you think that, in terms of looking at the long sweep of where this scandal has come from and the origins of it, is one of the factors, I'm sure it would just be one, but one of the factors, is there an element where, frankly, we venerate the NHS a little bit too much and don't ask the tough questions sometimes when we need to?
And that's why I've been brutally honest about the state of the NHS, making it clear it is a service, not a shrine. It is not the envy of the world. It's not just on its knees, it's on its face. And it needs serious reform and modernisation. Otherwise, it's not going to be there for us in the future. And I'm absolutely determined to make sure that we have that culture of honesty and openness, because if you can't be honest about the problem, how can you be trusted to solve it?
Just briefly on Israel, I mean, you might have seen the news overnight about Benny Gantz basically saying that he'll pull out of the government of Israel if there is no plan, because as far as he's seen, there is no plan for the post-war settlement. Shouldn't we be rethinking our commitment, which generally speaking as a government, Parliament has been pretty committed to the Netanyahu government, or giving it quite a bit of support? Isn't it amazing, extraordinary, that we're 9 months in and we haven't got any plan at all about what the post-war situation might look like? And even Benny Gantz is saying it.
Yeah, I mean, look, without wanting to wade into internal politics of Israel, I think it is a reminder to us that there are many, many voices in Israel, within the government and on the streets of Israel, who want to see the security of the Israelis guaranteed and the hostages returned, but are also looking to a future of peaceful coexistence with the Palestinians. And it has been the long-standing policy of the Labour Party and actually our country to support a two-state solution, a state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel. The way in which this war has been conducted, in terms of the number of civilian lives lost, innocent lives lost, has been appalling. And we have been critical in the Labour Party of that. And we want to see a ceasefire. We want to see the return of the hostages. And we want to see the international community rally to put in place a serious peace process so that out of the darkness of this war, we can have the peaceful future for both Israelis and Palestinians that they deserve.
Notable, well, just finally, just when I was joshing you about the six pledges and what's on it, what's not on it, notable perhaps that the plan around workers' rights isn't on it.
There are lots of things we're committed to that aren't on the card, and that doesn't mean we're any less committed to them. I don't.
But you'll know that there is concern from some, particularly within trade unions, about a potential dilution of Angela Rayner's plan for workers' rights. I mean, you can say that's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And look, this isn't just Angela Rayner's plan. This is the Labour Party's plan, and we are committed to it because, this is good for, good economy relies on good working conditions for its people. And I think what we've set out in terms of the New Deal for working people won't just be good for workers, it will be good for the economy overall. And we are committed to that. This has gone through the sausage machine of the Labour Party policy making process, like one of those things you don't want to see made, laws and sausages. We've been through that process.
So it's still going to be the first 100 days. Because that was the previous commitment, wasn't it? Within the first 100 days of a Labour government, it's going to happen within the first 100 days.
I think it'll be certainly an early priority. In terms of
not necessarily the first 100
I think
days.
that the challenge is some of what we want to do is quite complicated legislatively. So yes, we'll want to move quickly.
Because Angela Rayner had said before it would be the first 100 days. So perhaps there is not a dilution of the content, but maybe in terms of the timeline.
No, I don't. I'm not sure about that, to be honest. It's probably best to ask Angela. But I would be very surprised if we don't see movement on this very quickly within the first 100 days. But in terms of getting things like legislation through, that can take longer. But I think you can expect to see the New Deal for working people out the traps very early.
Angela Rayner in October 2023, Angela Rayner said Labour will implement its plans to bolster workers' rights within 100 days of taking office. So you're saying perhaps not 100 days.
Well, I think we'll certainly get the ball rolling within the first 100 days. I'm just thinking in a really practical sense about how quickly you get legislation through within the first 100 days. But it will be an early priority, and being no doubt about the strength of feeling on this across the Labour Party and across the shadow cabinet. I think what Angela Rayner has outlined is a transformational programme for working people in this country. Our economy, the success of our economy is built on the backs of working people. We are the party of working people. We are there to champion the interests of working people, and that is what the Labour government will do with the New Deal for working people if people give us that mandate at the general election, which I hope they will.